The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, the wrong kind. The kind that presses against your ears until your instincts start screaming. The lab lights hummed faintly above me, steady and indifferent, but the air felt heavy. As if it didn't want to move. I inhaled once. Nothing felt wrong. I inhaled again. That was when my chest tightened. Not panic yet. Not fear. Just a subtle resistance, like breathing through fabric. My mind did what it had always done best. Observe, analyze, calculate. Gas levels. Ventilation status. Emergency protocols. Then I smelled it. Faint. Almost sweet. My pulse spiked. Not emotionally but clinically. This wasn't an accident. I moved toward the wall console. Fingers steady despite the growing pressure behind my eyes. The system didn't respond. No alarms. No warnings. Too clean. Too intentional. I turned, my gaze landing on the corner cabinet where I had once hidden an emergency oxygen mask during a safety drill Marcus had mocked me for. "You're paranoid, Lyra," he had said, laughing. "Nothing ever goes wrong when I'm in charge." I crossed the room fast, lungs burning now, vision tunneling. I tore the cabinet open, hands shaking for the first time, not from fear, but from certainty. "Marcus." I strapped the mask on just as the room began to tilt. Oxygen flooded my system, sharp and cold, dragging me back from the edge. I sank to the floor, back against the counter, heart hammering. Through the glass wall I saw movement. Shadow passing. Someone pausing. Watching. I didn't scream. I didn't pound on the glass. I watched back, eyes clear behind the mask, and in that moment, something inside me snapped cleanly into place. This wasn't betrayal born of passion. This was strategy. This was removal. Marcus hadn't panicked. He hadn't miscalculated. He had planned this, clean, silent, plausible. Gas leak. A tragic accident. A brilliant mind lost too soon. And him. He would mourn perfectly. As the gas thinned and the system finally reset, I stayed where I was, breathing steadily, cataloging everything. My body was alive. My mind was sharper than it had ever been. Love evaporated. It passed. What remained was clarity. Marcus Thorne was not my partner. He was a parasite who had mistaken proximity to brilliance for ownership of it. I stood slowly, legs steady, hands no longer shaking. "You should have checked for redundancies," I murmured to the empty lab. "'Cause I always had them. And from this moment forward, I would become something far more dangerous than a woman he thought he could erase. I would become evidence." I didn't return to the lab. Not because I couldn't, but because I wouldn't. By the time dawn broke, I was already somewhere Marcus would never think to look. A borrowed apartment. No cameras. No familiar routines. I showered, changed, and watched the bruised skin beneath my collarbone fade from angry red to dull pink. Evidence of survival. Proof I was still here. But to the world Marcus controlled, I was already gone. I powered up my laptop, hands calm, mind sharp. Fear had burned off in the gas. What remained was focus. Clean, ruthless, and quiet. I tunneled into the lab's internal servers using credentials Marcus had once insisted I didn't need anymore. "You trust me, Lyra," he had said. I almost smiled now. The system welcomed me like an old friend. Logs, access records, internal messages. I watched in real time as Marcus moved through the lab I had built with him. His confidence visible even through lines of code. Elena followed closely behind. Eager, nervous, complicit. Then I saw it. File revision. My name removed. My breath didn't hitch. My pulse didn't spike. This wasn't pain. This was confirmation. I opened the internal camera feed just as Marcus leaned back in his chair, grinning, while Elena hovered near the terminal. "She was always the brains," he said casually. "But I'm the face. And now that she's dead, in a tragic lab accident, the billions are ours." Elena laughed. Nervous. Excited. "And no one will question it." "They already didn't," he replied. "People believe what's convenient." I muted the feed. There it was, the moment of theft. Not emotional. Not impulsive. Surgical. I didn't cry. I archived. Every timestamp. Every keystroke. Every deletion attempt. Marcus had been thorough, but not paranoid enough. He had forgotten one thing. I never trusted a single-point failure. Hidden beneath redundant layers, my original files remained untouched. Time-stamped. Verified. Immutable. Proof. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Congratulations, Marcus," I whispered to the empty room. "You just confessed." Hours passed as I watched them prepare for the announcement, their confidence growing with every unchecked box. They had already begun drafting speeches, accepting congratulations, planning futures that didn't include me. They believed I was dead. That belief was their greatest vulnerability. I closed the feeds and opened a secure channel, fingers hovering for a moment before typing a name I hadn't contacted before, but had researched thoroughly. Killian Gray. Government auditor. Scientific fraud. Relentless. They said he didn't bluff. Didn't negotiate. Didn't miss. I attached the files. The logs. The footage. Then I typed one sentence. "Dr. Lyra Voss. I survived the accident they staged. And I can prove everything." I hit send. For the first time since the gas had filled my lungs, I allowed myself a small, precise smile. I wasn't running. I was waiting. And when I stepped back into the light, it would be as something Marcus had never anticipated. Not a victim. Not a ghost. But the reckoning he had engineered himself. Killian Gray didn't respond immediately. That told me more than words ever could. Men like Marcus rushed. They filled silence with confidence, charm, noise. Men like Killian Gray let silence do the work for them. It meant he was reading, verifying, pulling threads. 3 hours later my phone rang. "I don't take anonymous tips," a calm male voice said. "No greeting. No warning. And I don't chase ghosts." "Good," I replied evenly. "Because I'm neither." Was. Not hesitation, calculation. "You survived a lab incident that should have killed you," he said. "You went dark instead of going public. And you waited until they committed patent fraud before contacting me." "Yes." Another pause. Longer this time. "That tells me two things," he continued. "First, you're telling the truth. Second, you're dangerous." I smiled faintly. "Only to people who lie." We met the next morning in a neutral place. No cameras. No names exchanged out loud. He looked exactly as I expected. Sharp eyes, controlled posture, the kind of stillness that came from authority that didn't need to be announced. He reviewed the files again, line by line, while I sat across from him, hands folded, breathing steady. "They tried to erase you," he said finally. Cleanly. "Impressive attempt." "They underestimated redundancy," I replied. His gaze lifted to mine. "And you underestimated how calm you'd be about it." "That's because panic requires uncertainty," I said. "I have none." For the first time, something like approval flickered across his face. "They're planning a public patent announcement in 4 days," he said. "If I move too early, they'll cry conspiracy. If I move too late, the damage spreads." "So you move exactly on time," I said. He studied me for a moment longer. "You're not asking for revenge." "No," I agreed. "I'm asking for correction." Killian nodded once. "Then here's how this works. You stay invisible. You don't confront them. You don't interfere. You let them believe the story they wrote. And when they step on stage, they'll be escorted off it." I exhaled slowly. Not relief, but alignment. This was the first person since the gas leak who spoke my language fluently. "There's one more thing," he added. "Once this starts, it doesn't stop. Your name will be restored, but your life won't go back to what it was." "I don't want it to," I said without hesitation. That earned me another measured look. Something warmer this time. "Respect." "Good," he said. "Because honesty like yours doesn't survive in small rooms." As we stood to leave, he paused. Lyra, you didn't just survive an attempt on your life. You rebuilt yourself under pressure. I optimized, I corrected. A corner of his mouth lifted. Of course you did. As I walked away, I felt something settle into place. Not safety, not comfort. Stability. Marcus believed control came from visibility. He was wrong. Came from precision. And soon, his carefully constructed future would collapse under the weight of truth, delivered by someone who never blinked, and a woman he thought he had erased. Marcus always became careless when he believed he had one. I watched it unfold from the quiet safety of distance, my presence reduced to lines of code and reflected arrogance. He moved through the lab like a man already celebrated, already forgiven. Death, especially mine, had simplified his life. Elena followed him closely, eager and nervous, trying to mirror his confidence. She laughed too loudly. She spoke too quickly. She wanted reassurance he would never give her. She was brilliant, Marcus said during one recorded conversation, voice solemn, perfectly measured. But fragile. Tragic accidents happen. The lie slid from him effortlessly. I didn't react. I annotated. Elena made the mistake 3 days before the announcement. She accessed a backup folder Marcus had never bothered to lock, assuming, as he always did, that no one else could see what he saw. She deleted a file, then restored it, then deleted it again. Indecision leaves fingerprints. Killian noticed immediately. She's panicking, he said over the secure line. People panic when they realize the story they're telling doesn't fully protect them. She knows she's disposable, I replied. She always was. Marcus meanwhile grew bolder. He rehearsed his speech aloud, pacing, smiling at his own reflection. I'll dedicate it to Lyra, he said once, mock sincere. A brilliant mind lost too soon. I muted the feed and closed my eyes. Not in pain, but in assessment. He didn't miss me. He missed access. On the eve of the announcement, Killian sent a single message. Tomorrow, 9:14, be ready. I slept that night without dreams. Not because I was numb, but because I was prepared. Morning came clean and sharp. I dressed simply, neutrally, as if I were any other observer returning from absence. When I arrived at the building, no one recognized me. To them I was a rumor. Footnote. Perfect. Marcus was mid-sentence when the doors opened. He didn't see me at first. He saw the badges. Escorts. The way the room shifted before the sound reached him. Killian entered without urgency. Authority never rushes. Dr. Marcus Thorne, he said calmly. You are under investigation for attempted homicide, scientific fraud, and intellectual property theft. Silence. Lena froze. Marcus laughed once, short, disbelieving. This is absurd, he said. Dr. Voss is dead. That's when I stepped forward. No, I said evenly. I optimized my exit. His face emptied. Not shock. Not fear. Calculation collapsing in real time. Killian continued, voice steady. We have original files. Timestamp data. Video evidence. And a detailed log of a triggered containment failure designed to simulate a fatal accident. Elena's voice broke. Marcus. He didn't look at her. He was looking at me. You should have stayed dead, he said quietly. I met his gaze without emotion. You should have verified deletion. The cuffs clicked shut. I didn't feel triumph. Felt closure. As they led him away, Elena sobbing behind him, Killian turned to me. Your name will be restored today, he said. Publicly. Completely. Good, I replied. Now let's finish this cleanly. Because justice, like science, only works when it's precise. The room emptied faster than it had filled. People always scatter once truth becomes undeniable. They don't want to be near it, don't want to remember where they stood when lies collapsed. I watched it happen from a distance, my name already circulating again, spoken carefully now, with respect, with unease. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't need applause. What I needed was quiet. Killian walked beside me as we left the building. His pace unhurried, his presence grounding. Outside, the air felt sharper, cleaner, like the world had recalibrated itself. "You handled that well," he said after a moment. "I didn't handle it," I replied. "I concluded it." That earned me a brief glance, something like approval. "Most people want vindication," he said. "You wanted accuracy. I wanted containment," I answered. Marcus was a breach. We stopped at the edge of the plaza. People passed us without recognition, and I preferred it that way. I felt lighter, not because I was free of him, but because my mind no longer had to account for his shadow. "There will be statements," Killian continued. "Questions. Attempts to reframe the narrative. They'll fail," I said calmly. "The data is immutable." He nodded. "You're right." Silence settled between us, comfortable and unforced. I noticed then how rare that was, to share space with someone who didn't demand explanation, who didn't flinch at composure. "Why did you help me?" asked finally. Killian didn't answer immediately. "Because fraud dressed as brilliance is still fraud," he said. "And because you didn't ask me to believe you. You showed me." I considered that. That's the only kind of trust one recognizes. His mouth curved slightly. "So do I." Later, alone again, I sat by the window of my temporary apartment, watching the city settle into evening. Messages waited unanswered. Invitations, apologies, offers. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened a single file, the original one Marcus had tried to erase. My work. My name restored not just in print, but in truth. For the first time in months I slept deeply. Not because I was exhausted, because there was nothing left to monitor. I didn't expect to see Killian again so soon. Or maybe I did, but I refused to label it expectation. I preferred to call it probability. He appeared 3 days later, not at my door, but in the quiet cafe 2 blocks from my apartment. The kind of place chosen for anonymity, not atmosphere. When I noticed him, he was already seated, hands folded, gaze lifted only briefly in acknowledgement. I ordered my tea before joining him. No pleasantries. No false surprise. "You didn't have to come in person," I said as I sat. "I wanted to," he replied simply. That alone told me more than any explanation could. We spoke first of neutral things. Procedures, timelines, the inevitable institutional aftershocks. He outlined what would happen next with Marcus and Elena, the investigation expanding like a controlled burn. I listened, absorbing without interruption. "They'll try to implicate you," he said finally. "Not legally, reputationally." "I anticipated that," I said. "They always mistake silence for vulnerability." "And is it?" "No," I answered. "It's restraint." His gaze lingered on me for a moment longer than necessary. Not invasive. Assessing. "You're different now," he said. "I'm precise now," I corrected. "Before, I allowed inefficiency." He nodded slowly. "And now? Now I audit everything." Something like amusement flickered across his expression. "Including people. Especially people." The conversation paused, not awkwardly. I realized then that Killian didn't rush to fill space. He allowed silence to exist without demanding performance. It was rare. "There's something else," he said eventually. "Unofficial." I raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "You'll be offered positions. Boards. Advisory roles. Some will be sincere. Some will want to own your credibility." "I won't be owned again," I said flatly. "I know," he replied. "That's why I'm here." He slid a thin folder across the table. I didn't open it immediately. "What is this?" I asked. "A proposal," he said. "Independent oversight. You build. I ensure no one corrupts it." I studied him now. Not as an ally, not as an authority, but as a variable. "And what do you gain?" "Transparency," he answered. "And proximity to something that matters." I opened the folder. It wasn't a contract. It was a framework. Boundaries clearly defined. Mutual accountability. Exit clauses. No ambiguity. You wrote this like someone who's been burned before, I said. He met my gaze. I've seen what happens when trust isn't structured. I closed the folder. This isn't control, I said slowly. It's alignment. That was the intention. Another silence followed. This one warmer. Charged but not reckless. I won't pretend this is purely professional, he added quietly. But I won't blur lines either. I appreciated that more than he knew. Then we proceed, I said. Deliberately. He smiled then, not wide, not performative. Real. When we stood to leave, he paused. Dinner, he said. Not a question. Not a demand. When you're ready. I considered it. Then nodded once. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a threat to be mitigated. Felt stable. The first attack didn't come from Marcus. It came from the world that had once applauded him. I learned this the morning my inbox filled with carefully worded concern. Invitations rescinded. Panels postponed. Articles rewritten with subtle doubt threaded between praise. No accusations, just implication. The most efficient form of damage. I didn't react. Catalogued. Killian arrived that evening, unannounced but expected. He didn't knock immediately. He waited, as if giving me the option to deny the moment. When I opened the door, his eyes moved over my face, checking for cracks. There's noise, he said. Yes, I replied. Manufactured. They're testing you. They're testing whether I'll beg to be reinstated. And will you? I stepped aside to let him in. No. I'll let them starve. We sat across from each other at my kitchen table. No documents this time. Just 2 glasses of water. Transparency, literal and otherwise. They're floating a narrative, he said. That you were unstable. Brilliant but volatile. That Marcus managed you. I laughed once. He couldn't manage a calendar. Killian's jaw tightened. It won't be enough. Not legally. But reputational erosion works slowly. I know, I said. Which is why I won't counter it directly. He leaned back. What's your approach? I'll release nothing, I said. No interviews. No defenses. I'll publish my work independently, under audit, open source review. Let the data speak. He studied me. You'll force comparison. Exactly. Truth doesn't need volume. It needs access. Silence followed. Not strategic this time, reflective. You're not afraid anymore, he said quietly. I am, I corrected. But fear no longer dictates my decisions. He nodded. That's the difference between survival and authority. The pressure escalated over the next week. A former colleague called, voice syrup sweet, suggesting reconciliation. A foundation offered funding with conditions. I declined them all. Each refusal felt like shedding dead skin. Killian remained steady. He never pushed. Never pulled. He offered options, not direction. When I asked his opinion, he gave it plainly, without attachment to outcome. One night, after a particularly long day, I found myself standing too close to him on the balcony. The city below was quiet, lights distant and indifferent. You don't try to save me, I said suddenly. He didn't turn. You don't need saving. No one's ever understood that before. He finally looked at me then. You don't want protection, he said. You want parity. Yes. And if I couldn't offer that, then this would end here. Beat past. Then he stepped closer. Not invading, just present. Then we're aligned. The choice was mine. Entirely. That was the difference. I reached for his hand. Not out of need. Out of clarity. The world could test me all it wanted. I had removed every uncontrolled variable. I didn't plan for intimacy. That was the first thing I noticed. How uncalculated it was. The night everything settled. The night the noise finally lost its grip. Killian was still there. Not as an anchor. Not as a shield. just present. We stood in my living room, the city breathing quietly beyond the windows, the world unaware that something irreversible had already ended. Marcus was finished. The case was sealed, not with spectacle, but with precision. Elena had folded. The record spoke. The truth had done what it always does when given oxygen. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt awake. "You're officially cleared," Killian said softly. "Every channel, every record." I exhaled long and slow. My shoulders dropped, as if I'd been holding a weight I hadn't acknowledged. "It's over," I said. "No," he replied gently. "It's complete." That distinction mattered more than he knew. I turned toward him, and for the first time since the gas-filled darkness of that lab, I let myself be still in someone else's presence. He didn't move closer. He waited, always waited, for my signal. I stepped into his space. Not rushed, not uncertain. My fingers brushed his wrist first. Test. He didn't flinch. His hand turned slightly, offering instead of taking. When my palm met his, the contact sent a quiet, grounding warmth through me. Real, solid, undeniable. "You're here," I said, almost to myself. "Yes," he answered. "I am." I rested my forehead against his chest. The steady rhythm of his breathing was not something I needed, but something I chose. His arms came around me slowly, carefully, as if I were something valuable rather than fragile. It had been a long time since touch hadn't come with expectation or cost. This didn't ask anything of me. I tilted my head up, meeting his gaze. There was no hunger there, no urgency, just intention. When he kissed me, it was restrained, brief, deliberate, a promise rather than a claim. My hand tightened slightly in his shirt, anchoring myself to the moment. "Yes," I murmured. Not to him. To the choice. He rested his forehead against mine. "We move at your pace." "I know," I said. "That's why I trust you." Later, when he left, the apartment didn't feel empty. Felt mine. I stood alone by the window, watching the city lights scatter like distant stars. Somewhere out there, people would continue to speculate, to rewrite, to forget. But the record was clear. I had survived. I had reclaimed my name. I had chosen connection without surrender. And for the first time in my life, my future wasn't something to defend. It was something to build, deliberately, honestly, alive.